Okay. Hi, everybody. And I'm continuing with a little bit of information about the personal identity profile. And when we say personal, it's not just that, because we can detect something of the soul ray as we work together, understanding the parameters of this test. None of this would have come to pass without the help of the Synthesis Foundation, the work of Eva Smith, who has made a video about the seven rays, which will be probably used in conjunction with some of what I said. My colleague, Rick Good, who has now passed on Columbus Day. I guess he'll be learning about new continents, and he's helped for, 30 years, more than 30 years in this work. It's been going for 35 years. My gratitude to Walter Pullen for reformulating the test, and for Stephen Renneberg and all his good advice about making this ready for you, and Catherine Manker, who has been our statistician and has really crunched the numbers for us so that we can get as accurate a test for you, a questionnaire for you, as may be possible. Now, I gave a little bit of an introduction. It may be followed by Eva's seven-ray seminar given in, what year is this? This is 2019. So the 2018 conference of the University of the Seven Rays, that was the 32nd conference. And now I'm going to get into the technical matters just a little bit more so that you can understand how the PIP test may assist you in developing a rational foundation for your estimation of your ray chart. At least your soul ray, which lasts a long time, your personality ray, which may change from life to life, your lower mental ray, your emotional astral ray, and your etheric physical ray. All of those may change from life to life. And as far as the triadal rays go and the monadic ray, in the upper stratosphere of your energy system, well, we'll have to wait for another test, which is already created. It's called the TARA, Transpersonal Astrological Rayological Analysis. So, Transpersonal Astrological Rayological Analysis. And it'll be combining astrology with the rays, even as we intend to do now, because I trust that along with your output for this earlier ray test, version 3 of the PIP, now gone on for 35 years, you will also receive a copy of your astrological chart in one form or another, and Walter can talk to you about that and prepare that. So you'll have a pretty good estimation of the energies which are available to you and which have to be used for spiritual purposes if you are an aspirant to the mysteries, the divine mysteries, or a disciple. And we trust that the people who will be most interested in the seven rays as the foundation of the new psychology will be aspirants or disciples. You'd have to pretty much accept an esoteric worldview or at least be quite interested in it to get into this matter. You see the sword on the wall. I'm here in the Temple of Silence here in Finland, which is my wife Tuija's beautiful little temple that she had built even 20 years ago. And that sword is not a sword of war, it's a sword of discrimination. When the Christ says, I come to bring not peace, but the sword, it's the sword of discrimination between reality and unreality, and between all the different kinds of energies and their qualities, which may affect your expression in life. So let us have the wisdom to learn how to separate this quality from that quality and be clear about what they are, and then put them all together again into a synthesis. I'm going to be a little bit informal. There's probably no other way. It's almost as if I were giving a 7-ray seminar, and we gave lots of those in the beginning to get the whole spread of the 7-ray work all over the world. Of course, in the United States and Canada and Mexico, but in quite a few parts of Europe and Australia and New Zealand. So we'll continue with that, and it's my hope that we will be able also to give 7-ray seminars over the internet. And, you know, that can be of use to you. They'll have to be relatively small, I think, maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 people at a time, and give you a better idea about what your rays may be, because according to what your rays may be, so will be the way you pursue the spiritual path, the kinds of meditations you do, the kinds of ancient writings from the old commentary which bring illumination to you. So there's a lot to learn, and thank goodness the wonderful Master DK, who is, I would say, maybe the leading messenger of the spiritual hierarchy at this time, has established for us the foundation of the science of the 7 rays and extended astrology. So we have the science of esoteric astrology, and has given us so much information about the chakras, the energy centers within our etheric body. And those three together, rayology, astrology, and what should we call it, chakrology, those three together form the basis of the new esoteric psychology, which I like to think of as psychology on the 5th force. We've had the 4th force, which has offered the transpersonal perspective, but now we begin to offer a lot of details about that transpersonal perspective. The details of the energies that you can summon and utilize, and the directions of the energies, and the distinctions of the energies, and the difference between qualified energies and qualified forces. There's just ever so much to learn. So if you are interested, I certainly would recommend you begin to do your work in the Tibetans' 24 books of esoteric psychology. 4.5 of those Alice Bailey wrote by herself, and the others in cooperation with the Tibetan teacher. Just get into it. I've been into it now for, well, it's getting to be almost 50 years. It'll be 49 years next year. And I was aware even before that, and into Theosophy and the secret doctrine and so forth. I don't know where my mind would be if I had not run into these wonderful books and studied hard. So do the same and pass on the good news that the ageless wisdom is well represented in the books by the Tibetan, and it will definitely lift a person high, or at least, higher than we are at the present time, and that's our goal here, the evolution of the individual and the evolution of humanity. And it is our hope that this ray work gives the opportunity to elevate ourselves and others and groups and humanity as a whole. The understanding of the human being is indispensable, and the new psychology based on the 7 rays, esoteric astrology, and the science of the centers, all of those sciences are equally indispensable and to be learned. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is a little bit autobiographical, kind of I don't know, it's spontaneous look at how I did my own ray test. Now, obviously, I've done it for many times, and I try to be very objective when I'm answering these different kinds of questions. And Rick Good and I started back in 1984, as you may know, and we had a lot of those little office cards with different questions on them. Well, it all evolved into a computer process with lots of checking, statistical work, and we've had the help of other friends who are adept at mathematics, help us to make sure the test is both verifiable and reliable. So we have pretty much confidence in this PIP test to give individuals who take it at least a start, a start in this wonderful business of assessing the 7 rays. And of course, the day will come, says the Tibetan, when assessment of rays will be based upon expert diagnosis. Well, we're not there yet. And in the centuries ahead, maybe we'll be looking into the eye and looking at the form and looking at the manners and the behavior and, and physiological, psychological stamps of a certain kind. And we'll know what the rays are, and we'll see clairvoyantly what they are, just as Master DK can do now. About 50 people, 51 people were his close students, and they had delivered to them directly what their rays were in the most reliable manner. For the rest of us, we have to figure that out the best we can and experiment, and that's what the PIP test is meant to do, to help us develop in a working hypothesis that we test out in our life. Now, what I'm going to do is, now, by now you probably have taken the PIP. Well, maybe you haven't. Okay, you can take the PIP and it'll ask for your demographics, and it will report your rays in general as they show up on this questionnaire, and it will report some things of the types of the rays, and it will look at your highest aspirations, and it will look at some of the characteristics in your nature that you have to transform. You might call them glamours and illusions, and then it will give you a printout, showing how you did on these things. So I'm going to go through my results page, and I'm going to try to illustrate the value of the test, the questionnaire, illustrate that, and give you an idea of how you might read or interpret your own results when they arrive on your computer after you've finished taking the test. And then of course, you spread them, pass them on, give them to your friends. They can have the test on their computer too, and in that way, the new psychology will spread. So I have here some results. Now, all I have to do is find them. All right, so this is the PIP results, personal identity profile number 3. And the copyright there is with myself and Rick, and of course, it's really being used in the Moria Federation and the University of the 7 Rays very strongly. I'm going to kind of read these things a little bit and maybe comment as I go along, and then we'll look at graphs and charts. And, this, as I say, this is for me a little bit autobiographical, but if we fill in some of the things that I feel, let's say, about my own incarnation here and its progress and its liabilities and so forth, you may get an idea of how to do this for yourself. So the Personal Identity Profile version 3 is designed to describe your personality and transpersonal self or soul in terms of certain essential subtle energies that condition all life on Earth. Those, of course, are the 7 rays. According to the teachings of the newest form of psychology, we're calling it esoteric psychology, these foundational energies emanate from the sun, the planets of our solar system, from the 12 constellations of the zodiac, our particular zodiac, and from 3 major constellations which are known in order, really. I have them kind of reversed here. The Great Bear for the first ray, Sirius for the second ray, and the Pleiades for the third ray. Of course, there's more to those constellations than just one ray, and sometimes we can substitute the Little Bear for Sirius, but these are the big constellations, the super constellations, we might say. And they work through the zodiac, and they work through our solar god and all of his planets, and eventually work through the earth and Shambhala and our monad and the hierarchy and our soul and into our personality. From the perspective of esoteric psychology, the energies with which advanced humanity must immediately learn to work are energies emanating from the 7 major stars of the Great Bear. Now, there might be, 140 some stars in that constellation, but there are 7 majors, and they usually form the wagon or the dipper, or it's differently known. The major configuration of that asterism is differently known in different cultures, and we all often call it the Big Dipper. Okay, here in the West, the ageless wisdom teaching asserts that the heavenly bodies are far more than massive, inanimate, that is, without soul, sky objects. On the contrary, according to the esoteric sciences, the planets, stars, and constellations are thought to be physical bodies and even subtle bodies, if we could see those things, of great celestial entities who have immense intelligence, the gods really, and are influence upon all human beings and many other forms of life of greater and lesser magnitude. Now, this doesn't mean that there's not one God in the universe. There is, the universal logos, but that God has many aspects, and the so-called lesser gods are simply aspects of the great universal deity. While there are influential entities within the local cosmos system, namely the many undiscovered planets and planetoids within our solar system and many neighboring stars, which all have their contributing astrochemical influences and their informing intelligences. The present form, at least, of the PIP, the Personal Identity Profile number 3, deals only with the energy influences of the most important of these entities, the 7 major stars or entities of the Great Bear, from which emanate the 7 energies known as the 7 rays. Now, at least the Big Dipper is the source of these 7 great psychological and physically impactful energies, but they go way, way beyond that. You can carry the system of 7s all the way up to the so-called top of the universe, and you'd find septinates of stars and septinates of constellations, and you'd find septinates of galaxies and of families of galaxies, and there would finally be some kind of ultimate 7 of the spirits. We might call them the ultimate spirits before the throne of the universal God. I mean, even in our Bible, Western Bible, it talks about the seven spirits before the throne, and those might be the planetary deities, the major ones, and the throne might be our solar god, whose external body is the sun. But we have it on our planet too, and there are seven great entities before our planet, the throne of our planetary logos, and every planet has that too. So try to absorb these things. It's a big world. It's a big cosmos. Lots is going on, and we might as well know a few things about the process. Now, going on, and maybe, I'll do the best I can to go from place to place. Now, in the PIP, we ask for demographic information. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and the kind of things that you might, that you will be asked to fill out, according to how you want it. So, our University of Seven Rays work is done in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where our conferences are, but it's really done all over the world, so I filled that in. And my birth time, March 31st, 1943, and I rectified this chart. It was the Second World War at the time, so my chart, or the time usually put down for my birth is 12:35 p.m., a little, after noon, about 35 minutes after noon. I rectified it about 20 seconds earlier, Central Wartime in Oak Park, Illinois. And we may have to put that in there for you so you can have the accurate chart that will accompany this accurate astrological chart. It asks me my present occupation, so I say, well, I'm a esoteric university director, with the University of Seven Rays and the Seven Ray Institute, and now the Moria Federation. So a director of esoteric studies, and basically a teacher and an author. I didn't put that down, but maybe if I were more complete, I would. My former occupations have been in the theater as an opera director and as a teacher of singing and a teacher of choir, vocal performance, and all that. Obviously, that's kind of a personality aspect to what I used to do, and we'll see how I interpret this, that from the personality emphasis, which was on music and theater and culture and the arts and all that, there was a transition into the esoterics at a certain point in life. My favorite subjects, you'll be asked. I had a major in vocal performance and theater. So, what do I really love? Well, what are my favorite subjects? Esotericism, esoteric philosophy, especially maybe esoteric astrology, esoteric rheology. Just as long as it has the word esoteric in front of it, it's one of my favorites. And do I have any hobbies? Oh boy, I don't think so. And but let's just say I say something rather abstract here: finding the universal substratum and being it, being that universal substratum. In other words, my hobby these days is being. I know it's a little odd, but there we have it, and that's really the truth. I'm looking for the great substratum of our universe, which leads to still greater substratum in the post-universal world or the supra-universal world. Those are the philosophical studies that you're going to find are reflected in my PIP chart as a high reading on the abstract part of the third ray. Okay, what factors life goals? Well, I'm associated with Master DK in some manner, and to help the ashram of Master DK, teach and spread the ageless wisdom wherever it becomes possible. And I keep on inserting this to learn to identify with being as being, with being and as being. So there is something about Aries that really gets into that, and my astrological chart will have to be also considered here. How long have I studied it? esotericism? Well, in this incarnation, at this time being, being at this time 76 years old, I've studied it for about 56 years. And how long have I studied Alice Bailey? About 48 years, almost 50 years. And if astrology and masonry are added in there, then about 53 years. How long have I studied the seven rays? As long as I've studied Alice Bailey. It became immediately my interesting subject, or subject in which I was most interested. And what about mundane astrology? Well, I've studied that since 1966, about 53 years. So all of this gives us an example of where you stand in life in relation to the esoteric worldview. And that's important when we're, sort of interpreting the general picture about you. We want to see how experienced you are in this form of thinking, and that will lead us to a more accurate estimate of where you stand in terms of which rays you are developing and so forth. And esoteric astrology, well, I've studied that almost 50 years, about 48. Okay, now it's very interesting. Master DK, when he was gathering his group around him, a group for training, which eventually had maybe 50 or 51 people, he wanted to know what they thought about their own race structure, because they had been reading a bit, and maybe he wanted to know a little bit about what they thought about their astrology. So they filled out an application, wasn't a long one, and they wrote their estimations of their race structure. And, so often they were just not correct. They were reversing their soul ray and their personality ray. And, they just, maybe the ray of a previous life was what they were emphasizing, when the ray of this particular incarnation was their true ray structure, and the previous rays were influential and so forth. So anyway, eventually he straightened all that out for them, and they may have had to wait a few years before he delivered his analysis of what their rays were and what it meant to them. He would start by giving their soul ray and personality ray, and then some time might pass before he would give them the rays of their mind, emotions, and body, as it were, or, etheric physical brain, we call that body, the body ray. And so they'd have plenty of time to think about it and to try to follow out what he suggested about how to live with those ray configurations. And of course, he knew their astrology as well, and sometimes he would mention it, but not so much. It was more the rays that he mentioned. So we're asking here for the estimate. How do I estimate different aspects? I ask, what about your monadic ray? Well, I think it's the third ray. A greater number of third ray monads passes through this planet than any other ray, and that includes also Mars and Saturn. A lot of third ray monads there, but I'm one of those people who thinks we really do have two monadic rays, and there's one that is associated with the logoic plane way up here, whereas the monad is on the monadic plane here, okay? So there's probably a ray for the liberated monad on the logoic plane, and I have a feeling mine is ray 2. I'm just so deeply in love with the color indigo, and certain of the notes, I have my reasons, but maybe you make an estimate. What is my confidence in this? Well, I'm fairly confident. What about my soul ray? Estimating my soul ray is it is the second ray of love wisdom, with an emphasis maybe on the third aspect of the second ray, which is the energy of meticulous entirety and specialized detail of the occultist. And I think it has, a sub-ray of the third ray. The third ray is really powerful with me, and I'm confident. estimate of my personality ray. Well, okay, it's been ray 4. I'm pretty sure about that. You know, the life of the artist and the person involved in culture and opera and singing and all that kind of thing. So it was ray 4. It still has a lot of ray 4. It's probably been on the 4th ray for a few lives, and it's now getting ready to move because in the latter part of your life, the last third, the personality ray can change or stay the same. And I believe my personality ray is either moving to ray 6 or maybe more probably ray 1. And I am confident about that estimation. What about the mental vehicle? Well, it's ray 3. I have abilities on the 4th ray, and the ability of analysis I have on the 5th ray, 3, 4, 5, sort of Mercury's rays. I'm quite a Mercurian type, but basically at the present time, I'm believing with a pretty fair confidence that the mental ray is the 3rd ray. Now, interestingly enough, the mental body reflects the monadic ray, the astral body reflects the soul ray, and the physical body reflects the personality ray. And there's a coloring that happens to the thought process, emotional process, and the physical action due to the rays, due to the impress of those higher rays. And I do write about that in my 2 volumes, Tapestry of the Gods. What about my astral vehicle? Well, it's mostly ray 6. And, you know, I'm an enthusiast and reacting quickly, and in my earlier life, reacting emotionally, quickly and zealously, and with a lot of devotion, and still having that devotion. But every once in a while, something nice happens, and I get swept by the 2nd ray in my astral body, and maybe one day, you know, they'll be more balanced, number 2 and number 6, maybe. All right. And finally, physical ray, well, I'm an active type. At least certainly was for most of my life, and not especially an orderly type. Although, you know, in the old days, we've all had all the rays, and when I arrange things on the operatic stage, I'm very orderly, but it doesn't transfer to other parts of my life. So I assume it's the active 3rd ray of activity. Yeah, 3rd ray of activity, basically. So anyway, you'll do that too. You'll fill those things out, and maybe we'll put something in there, you know, where you can say, you know, I don't know, low confidence, medium confidence, high confidence, something of that nature to help you pinpoint how you should respond. Because in this case, I responded simply because I knew, but we're always updating the test, the PIP. You know, there'll be a PIP 4 too, of course, and we'll, you know, give you some categories there. I would say, you know, it's a lot harder to determine your rays than it is because, you know, they're kind of invisible in a way, whereas with astrological factors, you know where the heavenly bodies are and you know where they are in the wheels surrounding you, and it's much easier to pinpoint their influence and their origin and their direction. With the rays, it's more subtle. The study of the rays goes along the 2nd ray line. The study of astrology goes along the 3rd ray line. And what I'm trying to say is that astrology is basically a 3rd ray science, and the study of the rays is basically a 2nd ray science. Okay, so that's those are what I would call the that is the demographics. As we want to get to know you in your own words, and you have plenty of occasion to fill those things out in the kind of detail you would like to do. I stayed fairly brief here, and I simply used confident. I might have said low confidence or no confidence or something like that. But after 50 years or so of studying the rays, I'm fairly confident about some of their positions. Then we go on, and it's interesting to know what are the rays at the present time, and if any of them have changed. Now, some of them do change over time, and by the end of your life, for instance, or let's just say the last third of your life, you may well be developing the personality ray that you will have in your next life. I find that to be the case with a lot of people, and I felt that my personality ray is basically changing from the fourth ray, maybe to the first ray, but not letting go of that fourth ray momentum. It's still very much there, and it can be aroused at almost any occasion. But the direction that your soul takes you will have something to do with the manner in which your rays change. One of the people in DK's group, he said, "Look, you've got you're a third ray soul, and you've got a sixth ray personality now. Well, but in your next life, you're going to have a first ray personality." And you could feel that that was already changing. And in the life after that, you're going to have a second ray personality. So the master and the soul of the individual are very close, and the master could see what the soul or solar angel has in mind for the coming lives. For myself, I feel the first ray coming on for better or for worse, and the sixth ray is always prominent in my nature. All right, so rays now, so you're going to be looking at some nice colored graphs you see here. Okay, I won't get into that too much until we read through this. Rays now. This chart is one of the most important. We see 7 elevations for the 7 rays as they are to be understood in general. Just, the first ray, we're not dealing with types yet. Without taking into consideration the ray types, there are ray types, at least 2, maybe 3 for the different rays, and maybe even, who knows, maybe even 7 types for each ray, making that magical number 49. So the ray types, we call them the subtypes of any particular ray. Yes, and as I say, even 7 subtypes may appear, but DK does say that each of the major rays, ray 1, 2, and 3, has at least 3 types. And in the new test, the Tara, it's more of a psychological meditative process over a few weeks. I do get into the different types of the rays and try to, have you understand and me understand what a difference it can make. Sometimes when you look at second ray people, and one of them is on the austere wisdom line of the second ray, and another is on the pure love side, and the other is on the detailed unity and meticulous entirety side, you can hardly tell they're all on the second ray, but they are. They express the types of the second ray. And, and thus it is with some other rays as well. And maybe it's so with all the rays. We still have a long way to go in this ray science. And it will be, one of the sciences of the future. And it'll be very important in the discovery of the soul, which we know will be, we're told, coming scientifically out of France with its fifth ray soul in the centuries ahead. All right, to gain an understanding of your rays now should, however, not be studied just in isolation. It should be studied along with the ray types, which we're going to get into to gain the best overview. As well, a study of your astrological chart is indispensable. Though this is a more advanced consideration, I'm just going to show you very quickly my own astrological chart. When you see the sun is in Aries with Mercury near the midheaven, and the rising sign driving me towards the center of my soul is the sign Cancer, and the moon is with Aquarius and with Mars, giving, sort of a certain electric nature, which I used early in my life if I could control it. So you're going to want to study your astrological chart along with your rays, and we're going to do everything we can. Most of you have your astrological chart, okay? But we'll do everything we can to provide that for you. Maybe, who knows, we'll use Walter's wonderful program, his astrolog program, where he is developing all kinds of interesting approaches. And you will have, before long, also your astrological chart, to which reference can be made when you're trying to assess what your rays may be. Now, do my rays necessarily reflect themselves in this astrological chart? In other words, because I have a certain astrological chart, does this mean that you can see it? You can see the rays from the chart? And DK says no. DK says in the Scorpio chapter, somewhere in there around 223 or, in the early 220s, he says, look, study first your character, and then try to find your personality ray, then try to find your soul ray, and then go into the chart and interpret accordingly once you are pretty confident of what your soul ray is and what your personality ray is. For instance, if I think I have a second ray soul, I look for the second ray planet Jupiter, and I find it in my rising sign Cancer, and it's in the 12th house here, which is connected with a lot of the second ray and with the whole idea of religion and philosophy and the subjective side of life. It makes a lot of sense. If I have a fourth ray personality, I see that my planet Mercury, distributing the fourth ray, is right up there on the midheaven, and so, prominent for that reason. We'll also give some classes on the interpretation of esoteric astrology as it applies to your particular energy configuration. Right, so just to show you, keep your chart handy because it should be read along with the ray chart. Okay, so rays now, it attempts to score your response to ray tendencies in the present moment at the present time. Okay, the moment, let's say, when you take PIP III. There is always a present moment, that's for sure, and a reasonably correct ray configuration for that moment. While the soul ray may change only once or perhaps at the most twice, we read the story that both the Buddha and the Christ, now having a second ray soul back in Atlantean days, took the third initiation in a fourth ray ashram, which meant they had a fourth ray soul. So they changed from ray 4 to ray 2. And all of us, if we have a soul ray that's 1, 2, or 3, we have changed. Okay, from ray 4, 5, 6, or 7, the only type of soul rays you can have when you're first individualized, and the only type of personalities you can have in the beginning, 4, 5, 6, or 7, but things change. So the soul ray may change once or twice, maybe, over your human incarnational history of millions of years, and your personality may begin to change in the present incarnation, so that, as I said, towards the last third of your life, you may evidence signs of the personality ray you will have in the next incarnation. And the mental ray can change, and the emotional ray can change, and so forth, but they're not changing all that fast or all that often. And so, we have to be very careful when we make that assessment. So it is true of the ray of your personality vehicles. So it must be understood that your ray formula is in a state of flux during your present incarnation. Maybe it will endure, and if you will have the same personality ray in your next life, then it's just not going to change. And let's say if you're an artist, frequently they're born with the same personality ray for a number of lives running. So, and you may have the same rising sign for a number of lives running. So, and each of the vehicles in your energy system has also sub-rays. Whether they're all the same or different has yet to be determined through research. It is best to study rays now as giving an overview of the present strength of the 7 rays as they manifest generally in your energy system at this time. Now, you may be high on one type of the ray and low on another. So we just talk about at first the general manifestation. You should not, however, assume that the highest ray is necessarily your soul ray, and that's really important. It may be your personality ray, or even the ray of your mind if you are very strongly mentally focused. It must also be said that wishful thinking, you know how it is, social desirability and other kinds of wish fulfillments, it sometimes affects the elevation of a particular bar in the chart. For instance, if you have a deep desire to be a strong and steadfast, you may respond to Ray 1 statements as if you were stronger and more steadfast than you really are. The other general scales, it often happens, and there's a lot of Ray 1 wishful thinking. I want to be invulnerable, strong, powerful. I don't want to feel the pain of life. I want to be able to resist it. Okay, a lot of people find that Ray 1 is more elevated in the test than maybe it should be if a very accurate assessment of their personality or their energy system were achieved. So, okay. So as far as rays formally goes, formally is not a specific time. It's just, more or less how I used to be, right? It's meant to help you differentiate between how you have been in general and how you really are now. And I'm leaving it vague on purpose. I don't want to say, go back 25 years, how were you? Or go back 15 years or 10 years or whatever. It's just a general subjective feeling about your character in days earlier than the days in which you are taking this test and thinking about it. Like in my own life, I say, well, look, I was an artist, I was a director, I was a singer, whatever, in maybe 20 years of my earlier life. And I paid a lot more attention to Ray 4 in those days than I do now. It's a general sort of feeling about where you were in those earlier days. And I don't want to be more specific, as I might put the takee, that's who you are when you take a test, might put the person taking the test in a straitjacket, and then they have to start thinking in a very concrete way. No, it's much better to have a feeling about what your character was, your direction, the kind of energies and forces you used is much better that way. And then maybe there's been an evolution into something more now. Or maybe it's just stayed the same, So there's a lot of the fudge factor here, but sometimes the fudge factor can yield a more accurate understanding than trying to be fifth ray meticulous about in this year how was I, in this year how was I. No, I'm opting for an easier method which will allow things to flow along. Okay, now the last little bit here. Astrological factors can also affect the elevation of the rays. Now think about that, if you're in Aries, you've got a lot of Ray 1 in Aries, and it can raise the Ray 1 scale, even if you're not in your ray chart Ray 1. The 7 rays are transmitted through various astrological signs, constellations, yes, constellations and signs, and planets. And so, a particular kind of astrological emphasis at the present moment may stimulate or depress the elevation of a certain ray in rays now, independently of your ray formula. Suppose you've got Pluto is a very powerful Ray 1 planet. Maybe you've got Pluto crossing your ascendant or conjunct your sun or conjunct your midheaven. That first ray from Pluto is going to last maybe quite a while. And so your feeling of being on the first ray is going to increase while Pluto is in that position. So you have to be aware of passing ray influences due to astrological factors. Now, maybe later it's going to be pointed out that the rays have their cycles too. within your ordinary incarnational life, and there are times when different rays will be more pronounced. As I say, the study of the 7 rays is really in its infancy at the moment, but we can know enough to really help us on the spiritual path. So this is why it is very important to understand esoteric astrology when attempting to gain an accurate assessment of your ray chart or your ray formula, really both the same thing. For a more complete picture, your astrological chart should definitely be considered along with the testimony of PIP III. So enough said on that. I think we know the importance of astrology. So in one hand, let's say the left hand, right hand is the rays, in the left hand is astrology. You have to put them together to get a more complete picture of who you really are in general and at certain occasions. Well, let's go on and take a look at some of the charts for rays now. Well, there's one of them. Okay. Let's see if I can. So let's see. Do I have? Doesn't rays now. Yeah, I read about rays now, just now. Okay, well, here's how it looks for me. And, well, the rays are portrayed in their appropriate colors. Red for the first ray, indigo for the second, green for the third, yellow for the fourth, orange for the fifth, and kind of a choice between silvery rose and lighter blue for the sixth and violet for the seventh. And there are other colors too. I won't get into all that, but these are not the only colors that you can use for the rays, but they are popularly used. So, you know, in my own particular case at this time, well, I always have a lot of ray 6 of passion, devotion, idealism, crusading, you know, whatever, for a cause, and quite a high ray 2 of love, wisdom. So that I'm definitely on the 2-6 type. And that can mean, of course, that there was a time when let's say maybe my soul was on the 6th ray and has made a transition or is making a transition onto the 2nd ray. Ray 4 is pretty prominent, and ray 3 is prominent, and so increasingly is ray 1, but I have to try to figure out, is that really ray 1 increasing, or is it the result of my Aries ray 1 energy? Now with ray 2, I'm not terrifically represented by Pisces, not much, Virgo, not much, you know, at least in the original ray chart, original astrological chart, and maybe there is some Gemini. Those are the 3 ray 2 constellations. I do believe that the indigo ray 2 is where it's at, but from this general chart, I can't tell whether it's on the love line, the wisdom line, or maybe on the meticulous entirety line. The only thing that you want to look at the highest and you want to look at the lowest. And in this particular case, ray 5, which is a practical ray dealing with sensory reality, is not all that high. And ray 7 is worse. You know, ray 7 is quite low. You know, it's just recording in at about 23%. So as I say, we've all been on all the rays, definitely. But for me, the issue is I don't apply ray 7 so much in my everyday life. I apply it more in art. When I was an artist or an opera director, whatever, that's where I applied it, kind of very precise formations on stage and things of that nature. But it wasn't enough to transfer into everyday life. So it's probably, you know, on the low side. So if I just wanted to look at this in general, my ray 6 might need a little bit of taking down, ray 2 increasing, ray 7 increasing, and more or less equal are the first ray, the third ray, and the fourth ray. Now we're going to see some maybe interesting things here a little bit. And when we go to the formerly side, with formerly, Uh, the chart is meant to reveal how the 7 rays express through your energy system at some time in the past. Remember, I wasn't being overly specific. We are not looking for your assessment of any particular exact time in your life, but rather a kind of, this is what I call it, subjective average, which contrasts how you believe you used to be compared to how you believe you are now. Quite simply, the ray elevations on the graphs are meant to show you where you have been compared to where you are now, energy-wise, okay? You will thus see what rays have, in your estimation, grown stronger, have remained more or less the same, or have been reduced in strength of their expression. Thus, when comparing rays formerly and rays now, you can see important trends in your life and also perhaps identify the underlying astrological trends as well. Well, let's take a look at this. Now, maybe, there wasn't so much difference between Ray 6 now and Ray 6 formerly. I do think I'll have to investigate that. I do think there was more Ray 6 formerly, but Ray 4 was really a lot higher in the life of an artist, and Ray 2 was lower. See, right now I've got about almost 90% of Ray 2, but in the old days, more like 70%. And here's Ray 4 now, when I'm no longer, so much involved in the arts, but it was in the old days some 85%, and that's a lot higher. With Ray 5, it has grown in present days, and Ray 7 more or less the same. Ray 1 has definitely grown, see. Today it's over 70%, and in the old days it was 50-something percent, 57%. So, Ray 3 more or less the same. Ray 5 in the old days much less. I really could have cared less about the sciences, but being what I tried to be, a good student, I naturally studied everything. That's a Ray 2 tendency. So right there, you see there have been changes over the course of life. An increase of Ray 1, an increase of Ray 2, Ray 3 more or less the same, Ray 4 a big decrease, okay, compared to how it was, because it was really a Ray 4 life, with all that music and drama and, choirs and all that kind of thing out of my Ray 4 personality. Ray 6, I'm kind of surprised that they're more or less the same from formerly to now. More, however, I do think that the Ray 6 is decreasing a little, but the test tells me different, and Ray 7 more or less the same. So I kind of know where I'm going. Now, in the next graph, I combine them both because how I was and how I am now, they influence each other. How I was influences how I am now, because we have a lot of carryover from the past, kind of a momentum from the past. And I say here in describing it that this chart is useful because it shows how the tendencies of the past, formerly, fuse and blend with the tendencies of the present. Our present responses and behaviors have many, quote, carryovers from the past. At our stage of evolution, we are rarely free from past tendencies. Though they are of the past, they live in the present, okay? And thus it is interesting to see the result of combining the past and the present. And I guess what I see, naturally Ray 4, I get swept by this Ray 4 energy, and it's not as low as it usually would be in the present. And Ray 2 and 4 are quite equal. And so, well, not surprisingly, Ray 6 is really up there, because I'm a bit of an esoteric zealot, and really want to, for various reasons, karmic, some of them, advance the great ageless wisdom, and it is my great ideal. Not much ray 7, really not much ray 5. So there's an equality between the second and the fourth ray, more or less an equality between the fifth and the seventh. They're very low. So the practical side of life, where you're really manifesting, and some people love to read the manuals when they get a new piece of equipment, and there's others of us that just start pressing the buttons all at once and hope for the best. Every once in a while, I'm forced to read the manual and I don't like it. But ray 5 and ray 7 would read the manual and do it correctly. And I'm always very proud of myself once I have read the manual, but I find it to be a distasteful task. So maybe some of you can relate to that as you go along. And ray 3 and ray 1 more or less equal, fairly reasonable representation. I have a lot of the ray 3 constellations. I have strong Libra, strong Cancer. Capricorn isn't really represented except by my wife. You can have other people in your life who help you represent certain rays and tendencies. So, although I think I'm a second ray soul and am really confident that I am along a certain line and have been a fourth ray personality, we really do have that sixth ray at this time sticking up there. And maybe, you have to be honest. When you do the test, you have to, especially if you know the test, you don't want to shape it according to what you know is coming. You don't want to get a desirable outcome. You want to get a true outcome. Well, I did it fast the other night, but that's how it turned out, Shall I apologize at the moment for my high ray 6? Okay, it is there. And it has been a driving force. And of course, Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the sixth ray planet, and the rising sign Cancer is ruled by Neptune, esoterically, which it should be, which is a sixth ray planet. So astrologically, there's a lot of the sixth ray, and I don't know whether I should think that it is coming down or not. Now, when we study the types, we're going to see some interesting things, because the types get more specific, so you can kind of see where you stand generally on the ray, and where you stand in terms of the specific divisions, and they can be very different. I mean, the difference between a third ray abstract thinker who is a philosopher and a practical businessman also on the third ray can be a huge thing. And it is in my chart as well. I hope I'm giving you an idea how this can be used to look at your life, and try to see how the rays are blending into that. All right, so now we have what's called a formerly versus now comparison. Now, we up here, we looked at formerly and we looked at now. Okay, now we're putting the two together to make it quite easy to understand. This chart is useful because it shows the global ray elevations. Remember, we're not working with types right now. The global ray elevations side by side from formerly through now. This is another way of seeing important global ray trends in this particular incarnation, and it's visible immediately, isn't it? There's been an increase in the first ray, and it has been necessary. There's been quite a significant increase in the second ray of love wisdom, as you would expect if the second ray is the soul ray. And if I'm at that point in my evolution where the soul should be influential, and I think I am, and I think many students of Master DK are in the same position. They're at that point in their evolution when the soul should be influential. When it comes to the third ray, not much change from the past. The fourth ray is a diminution. And actually, I think it should be even more, a little bit more, but everybody is entitled to see and to think about what it should be. Certainly, I gave up the singing business, and I gave up the teaching of music and opera and all that kind of thing. But I didn't give up writing music. I still have written operas and 16 different oratorios and rituals and operas. So I really stayed in the Ray 4 business, and I used it for teaching purposes. So you notice that if you compare Ray 2 the way I used to be with Ray 4, a lot more Ray 4, but Ray 2 the way I am now, and Ray 4 a lot less Ray 4 and a lot more Ray 2. It looks like the third ray has increased a little bit. I'm quite woeful when it comes to the business side of it and the practical outer activity side of it. And then Ray 5 has definitely increased as you try to become more precise about your definitions and your understanding. Hardly a difference in Ray 6. And that's surprising. And maybe some of my friends would say to me, I told you so. I told you so. Okay. Anyway, not much change and not much change in Ray 7. If anything, I would think that it would increase a little bit, but it seems to have decreased a little bit. So, but that may not be a significant difference. And so all the percentages are there, and you get a graph, a bar graph, which easily shows you increases and decreases. Now, what's the next? Okay, now this is Ray's formerly to now difference. So this shows you what the increases and decreases might be in terms of percentages. Really, you're going to get more information here than you may know what to do with. But notice the way this graph is set up, it doesn't go above 25%. So there are not tremendous, huge increases or decreases. This chart is useful in seeing, according to percentage increase or decrease, the degree to which ray strengths have changed over time. The relative strength of the rays is constantly changing during the course of a given incarnation and from one incarnation to another. We all have all the rays. Okay, I remember when I visited London headquarters of the Arcane School long time ago, maybe 32 years ago, and one of the guys that worked there for a long time, he said, well, don't we all have all the rays? And I thought it was kind of a naive statement, but he was absolutely right. We all have all the rays. However, the emphasis changes, thus changing the emphasis of any given ray relative to others. And the astrological periods figure into that. When you have powerful planets along a certain ray and they come in at a certain time, the ray emphasis is going to change. However, temporarily, but you will always have a basic ray structure, and it's when there are changes in the basic foundational ray structure that's when we're really interested. We want to know if there's a certain trend to the ray changes we are undergoing or have undergone. Perhaps the ray trend of the next incarnation can be discerned. Like all disciples, we may want to have more and more of the virtues of the rays, even though we do not feel particularly related to them. But a realistic estimation is called for, realistic, and not one simply based upon wishful thinking or ray idealism. I've emphasized that. Well, there's been, a 16% increase in Ray 1 from the past. A lot of increase in Ray 2, as you would expect. Now, one of the things I think that your soul ray may come in quite very strong in the beginning of life, but then it kind of takes a back seat as you develop your present personality ray. Then it comes in again, you know. So this idea of the soul ray pulling back a little bit and then entering more and more strongly once the personality ray can support the expression of it is something that we have to have in our minds. I guess I was always a Ray 2 type, but the academic Ray 2, which I became and so forth, just as DK says, never enough. You know, you have to know to heights unscaled, always conquering new areas of knowledge and so forth. The third aspect of the second ray, it definitely increased. There's been an increase in ray 3, and I suppose it's along the line of abstract thinking. The most significant thing is the decrease in ray 4, as I feel less and less like the fourth ray personality, but still certainly have all that momentum from the fourth ray, and I'm working on something else right now. But the fourth ray is still there. Still there is, well, it's not a big decrease, it's 10%, but okay. And notice that the biggest increase is ray 5. I believe, well, it's pretty close to the ray 2 increase, isn't it? But in terms of being precise about knowledge and factual and reasonable and analytical, this has really come in, although the ability to be mechanical has not. And that's the second part of the fifth ray. And so we'll see with the types that there is a problem. You know, you may be quite elevated on one side of a ray and you may have a real deficiency on the other. And I know quite a few people for whom that is the case, you know. All right. So ray 5, big increase along with ray 2. And those are the two rays of the solar angel, generically considered. And of course, one gets interested in that as one follows the development of esotericism. One studies what's going on the higher mental plane. Not much increase in ray 6, thank goodness. I don't want to be one of those people that say ray 6 is bad. We're in the middle of we're in the middle of a approximately 40,000 year ray 4 cycle, of which another 21,000 years in a ray 6 subcycle of that ray 4 cycle has got to run. So from a larger perspective, there's a lot of ray 6 around. And we are, you know, exiting the age of Pisces in two senses, in the smaller equinoctial age and in the larger approximately 25,000 equinoctial age. We're also exiting. Pisces has a lot of ray 6, and maybe Aquarius that we're going into doesn't. But there is a little bit of an increase. So I'm wondering what it is. You know, is it my enthusiasm for the teaching, which is sort of a burning enthusiasm and likely to show up as a Martian attitude, since Mars is so strong in my horoscope, as you see Mars and the moon together in the 8th house, where you have a lot of conflicts about overcoming negativity and blazing ahead into power and positivity. So ray 6 is very prominent. And then reduction of ray 7. Usually I would think it would be an increase in ray 7. I don't know why that reduction is there, but in this taking of the test, it seems to be minorly present. Okay. So anyway, ray 1 is increasing, ray 2 is increasing, ray 5. And the other increases or decreases are mostly negligible, except for the bigger one in ray 4. And I think that is so. I've certainly stabilized my character, so the amount of conflicts I get into with respect to others and with respect to myself, and remember, Aries is a conflicted sign, you know, always willing to take on a fight of some kind or other, that has been reduced, and we will see that when we look at the types. I hope, I know I'm spending some time on this, but I'm trying to fill in for you how we might use the chart uh, when we have a little knowledge of astrology, and also reviewing our life, our incarnation. How has that been? And we compare all those things together. All right, now we go on to something else. And the next thing we move on to is the ray types, and these are very important. Um, as I say, there are probably 7 types related to each of the 7 rays in the last analysis, but PIP III emphasizes only 2 major types, which correlate with hints the Tibetan teacher is given. He says one type on this ray is lazy and the other type is active, like that with the 3rd ray. So he's given hints in various of his books. In most cases, the distinction between type A and type B relates to the degree of abstraction or the degree of concretion. At least this is the way it looks to me at the present moment, that oftentimes A represents the more abstract side and B the more concrete manifested side. As in the case of type 3A and 3B, abstract philosophy and mathematics and all that, and 3B being much more activity, business activity, oftentimes arranging things on the physical plane. Types 5A and 5B, yes. 5A is is purer in its mathematics and its analysis, and 5B is more the applied side. But it's not present everywhere, that type of easier distinction. For practical purposes, we might think of 2 ray types offered as 2 types of which frequently appear in relation to a particular ray. Now, in the Tarot test, I went on and I pretty much described 3 types, and in some cases I think I described all possible 7. But as I say, that test is not for everyone, and you have to be, I think, a pretty serious aspirant or disciple to really wade through that and go through the process. After about, it'll take 3 weeks to meditate and do all the things required. And then by that time, we'll be ready with a printout for you. We've had printouts in the past, but, ran into a little trouble after Rick passed on, and we're very grateful to Walter for seizing things and helping us get, I think, what an important approach to rheology back to you. All right, now it should be understood that it is possible for you to score high on one type of a given ray and low on another type. I've been mentioning this. So often people on the same ray, now this is an interesting idea, may not recognize each other because they are examples of different types. So Master DK, for instance, is given 3 types in connection with the 2nd ray. Turn to page 518 of your Discipleship in the New Age book. You'll see all that spelled out, especially the 2nd ray soul. Those on the wisdom or love aspect of the 2nd ray may not recognize each other immediately as belonging to the same ray. I like to think of the first as the Buddha type and the 2nd as the Christ type. Some people using the PIP have found the ray types charts even more indicative of their rays, that is, of their ray formula, than the general ray charts, considering the rays as 7 great divisions of energy. That's what we've been through in the first part of this analysis. We've been through the rays in general. Now we're going to go into what we call the 14 types. Maybe we should and could do 21 types, and in the Tarot test, I do. Now, one thing's for certain, if you score very high on one of the types of a ray, even if not on the other type, that ray is probably strong in your energy system. So even if you have a low tendency towards activity, towards busyness, towards business, whatever, You may be the philosophical type on the third ray, and it's strong in your energy system, even though you're low on one of the types. The only exception here might be a high score on ray 1A, which seems to evoke a high score even from those who do not have a strong ray 1, but wish they had. Now, the social desirability factor, the esoteric desirability factor, like it's really good not to have ray 3 or ray 6 because they're out of fashion, but it's really good to have ray 7. That kind of thing can skew the way you answer the questions. So, we have to be on the outlook for the way our own wishful thinking may have entered how we responded. Now, this is not yet an exact science for us, for the Tibetan who can see these things with exactitude in the inner worlds. It is an exact science, okay? But the day will come when expert diagnosis will be possible for us, okay? Now, right. The chart has 14, not just 7, bar scales, and it represents 2 major types for each ray. Only 2. Well, it's enough to begin with. For a detailed description of the types, please study Tapestry of the Gods, which I wrote, long time ago, maybe 30 years ago, 33 years ago, volumes 1 and 2. The ray type divisions are as follows. Now here, I think I can just, I'll read it. Ray 1A, the strong and steadfast type of the first ray, like the oak tree, much correlated with the influence of Vulcan and Saturn. And this scale generally tends to be too elevated in the case of many people. When authentic, however, not just wishful thinking, it indicates the ability to stand steady despite the onslaught of opposing forces, sort of the, what can I call it, the mighty oak aspect of the first ray. But ray 1B, this is the more destructive type of the first ray. And, we're told about England that it has a lot of first ray from the building aspect. It's got a lot of Vulcan. Doesn't necessarily have a lot of Pluto, the more destructive type. So it's much correlated with the influence of Pluto and perhaps with Mars. It is rare that those who choose ray 1A for reasons of social desirability or esoteric desirability choose ray 1B for the similar reasons. When 1B is high, it almost always indicates the presence of first ray in the energy system and perhaps a first ray soul. In other words, it's hard to fake 1B, The destruction repels the type who is not really on the first ray, and so they have this high 1A, I'm strong, etc. And then when they get to 1B, it gets much lower because this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is the defining aspect of destruction for good purpose. But when there's a real elevation on that 1B, I really look for a significant presence of ray 1, maybe even the soul in that individual. Now there's ray 2A and 2B. Of course, ray 2C is really important. It's meticulous entirety and detailed unity, but it doesn't fit in this test. It's on the Terra test. Ray 2A, the pure love type. It's more the Christ type. Those who strongly express the Christ aspect of the second ray score high on this ray type, and this type may be at first somewhat lacking in those whose approach to spirituality involves, strictly speaking, the pursuit of wisdom. Like I say, these types may not recognize each other. The Buddha and the Christ are brothers, but the Buddha has the third ray monad, at least that, and the Christ has the second ray monad. And there's going to be a difference, even though they both have the second ray soul, and the Tibetan, I think a third ray monad largely, and he's emphasizing the meticulous entirety aspect of the second ray. So, that sword on the wall, we've got to have that sword of discrimination in order to tell one energy from another and really, clarify them. The fifth ray is helping there as well, as it's ruling all cleavages, all separations for the sake of distinction. So we can be clear, okay? When it comes to ray 2B, I call it the wisdom type, those who strongly express the Buddha aspect of the second ray score high on this ray type. This type may be somewhat lacking in the expression of love, as the Tibetan describes in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. They can even be a bit cold, They emphasize wisdom instead, though in our solar system, love and wisdom together can hardly be separated from each other because we live in especially a dual system. And as I said, being on the type 2C myself, and having, of course, some 2A and some 2B, as we all do, I find that I wish to see were represented here, but it's not really. So we'll have to wait until that other test is available, and then you'll see. Some of the questions that I have on the wisdom type really belong on the 2C type, but the Tibetan, after all, is a Tibetan monk, a Tibetan abbot. He's high in Tibetan Buddhism, so he would be close to the Buddha, and also he would have the meticulous entirety side emphasized as well. 1 and 3 are on the same ray line. Okay, then we get into the third ray. And notice the colors that I'm using to kind of describe this. They are appropriate colors to the rays. Ray 3A, the abstract thinking type of the third ray. This type tends to be elevated in those who like to think abstractly in relation to philosophical, mathematical, economical, or in general speculative subjects. Like, I don't know, but if I speculated, it might be this, it might be that. In such individuals, contact with the monastic permanent atom tends to be activated via an aspect of the Antakarana or the rainbow bridge, and you see that here. Here is the monastic permanent atom, and that is where the abstract mind does come in. And in my own case, I find I'm using the abstract mind a lot, especially in the philosophical search for the nature of being. Okay, and the meticulous entirety is used otherwise. Now, what about 3B? This is the business and active type of the third ray. Ray 3B is more, at least at this time, materially focused than 3A. 3A is said to be impractical. DK says, okay, look, you can't even keep your checkbook straight. Certain types on the third ray. Well, finally, I learned to do that. But I pitied my father when I was in college, okay? So this is characterized by a life of great outer activity, both on the physical plane and in the concrete mind. So there's a contrast there, and we just use 2, and in the Terra test I isolate another type, as I do for all of them. So there are 21 energies as a whole, and maybe more. Now the fourth ray, maybe the higher part of the fourth ray, is the harmony part. This ray is called harmony, beauty, and art. So ray 4A is more inclined to work sensitively and aesthetically towards harmony than to engage in conflict. And he calls it, you're literally the higher part of the fourth ray. Well, I guess you have to overcome your many conflicts before you can get into that harmony part. When it comes to ray 4B, well, there's conflict, and a lot of people don't like that, and Out of social desirability and esoteric desirability, they suppress that. So it's more dramatic, more conflicted type of ray 4. 4B lives a life of many struggles between opposing forces, the pairs of opposites, soul and personality, both within the environment and within the human energy system. The final tendency may be directed towards the achievement of harmony, but not without considerable dramatic conflict as the forerunner of the harmony to be achieved. Now, in my own case, a lot of 4B in my earlier life subsiding, as I learned more and more what the second ray was all about, and as the soul took over. Now we get into the others. Orange is one of the colors of the fifth ray. 5A, a lot of the esotericists score high on 5A because they like to use the mind in an analytical and discriminating manner. The analytical, discriminative type of ray 5, type 5A, has a keen analytical approach to many matters. It is known for its mastery of factual detail and specialized subjects. Well, we may think that esotericism covers the whole universe, but a lot of people looking at what we do think it's a very, very specialized subject. So anyway, we learn, we memorize, we analyze many things given by the Tibetan, great information and knowledge. This is a knowledge approach to the fifth ray, but what I call 5B is quite different. The mechanical inventive type of ray 5. Ray 5B is inclined to make practical application of all it knows, especially in the field of mechanics, electronics, and in general, in all technical fields of applied knowledge. If you're having someone repair your airplane for maintenance, you better hope they have a good 5B score and not a ray 4 score. And even 5A won't help too much unless you can really apply the knowledge. So it's the applied and more concrete side. Now, ray 6, 6A, it's more a Neptune type. It's the devoted type of the ray 6. It rules the solar plexus for disciples, whereas Mars is ruling the solar plexus for the average individual. Just go to your esoteric astrology book and look on page 517, and you'll see the ways the different planets and their rays are ruling the chakras. So it expresses a gentler type of sixth ray, more expressive of the Neptunian energies, but sometimes, when Mars combines with Neptune, we get these demonstrations on the ocean that are hardly gentle, these great storms and typhoons and all that. Anyway, it represents a type of energy which inclines toward deep attachment to the object of devotion and to transcendental idealism. So it's really much more the abstract side of the sixth ray, and this is sometimes called the ray of abstract devotion in general. But now 6B is more concrete. It's much more Martian, really. It's the fiery, zealous type of ray 6. Type 6B expresses forces more correlated with Mars than Neptune. The nature is fierce and often destructive when its ideals are challenged. This type of sixth ray energy can often be involved in the persecution of those who do not share its ideals, visions, and creeds, and is given to fanaticism. I'm quite sure that I've had, a lot of that type of sixth ray in my system. And one of the reasons for the elevation of the sixth ray in the general chart is because of this high 6B tendency, a high Martian tendency with, Mars as the ruler of the sun sign, one of the rulers, conjunct the moon in the electric sign Aquarius. So it's the past, and it's an electrical, fanatical, six-ray, zealous past, hopefully being corrected in this incarnation. Now, the seventh ray, and again, there should be a 7C, really emphasized here for the ritualistic type of seventh ray individual. And in the Tara, I do that. So the 7A is highly organized type of ray 7. Type 7A is often correlated with a personality on the seventh ray. The love of correct appearance, pattern, routine, and arrangement is pronounced. And the power of Saturn is prominent, not so much maybe the power of Uranus. It's more Saturnian, it's quite tight, it's quite strict. Okay, now 7B, I'm calling it more the Uranian transformative type. More likely to be correlated with the seventh ray soul than with the seventh ray personality, at least on this test. The other tests with their own idiosyncrasies and tendencies. And regarding renovation, renovation, and reorganization are seen to be of greater importance than the maintenance of strict order. So the power of Uranus, it's a largely seventh ray planet, is prominent. So you get the idea. There are types. And sometimes I just wish on this test, for the sake of completeness, that I had included the third type. But as I say, we'll have to wait for the Tara, and maybe we'll even, if our sort of discrimination is keen enough, we'll be able to differentiate between 7 types one day. But in the beginning, it's not so important. Just the general ray type and just the general ray and the type, either the first or second type, those are the important things for the kind of lives we are leading right now. So now maybe I can get into my own results, and I think you're going to find this interesting for yourself, because here we're really splitting the ray. Now, earlier we just looked at the ray in general. There it is, in general. And we have certain questions that don't emphasize the A too much or the B too much. They just emphasize qualities shared by anyone on that particular ray. But now we're looking at really splitting into A and B. So, if we look at this in my own case, well, the destructive side of the first ray is not high. And the steadfast, persistent type is relatively high. In a certain sense, almost twice the percentage of the true destructive side. Obviously, I'm not a Ray 1 soul, but Ray 1 is increasing, maybe along the personality line. Now, when it comes to the contrast on Ray 2 between the love side and the wisdom side, the wisdom seems to be stronger these days anyway. Maybe not by so much, maybe 70% to 86%. Okay, it's about 15% difference. And as I said, the wisdom type tends to take in and be resonant with the meticulous entirety type, except the wisdom type deals with a lot of profound simplicities and ultimately leads the individual into Shambhala, whereas the meticulous entirety type deals with a lot of details. Well, look, in my own case, there's quite a contrast here between the two aspects of Ray 3. Yeah, you might say it's the highest type I have is the abstract thinking philosophical type. It's up there, goodness, at 97%, heavens. So, but if we go to the business and active type, the more practical type in the world, it's down to 20%. So there's a huge split there. It might show the general third ray as being reasonably represented, but in fact, it's really 3A that is carrying my approach to the third ray. And probably that's because I have a third ray monad and a third ray mind and a third ray brain. So That's why 3A is so very, very high. When it comes to the harmony versus conflict side, we're going to see quite a difference when we go to formerly, okay? But anyway, they're fairly equal, and the conflict is still a little bit higher. Now, one astonishing split here in my own character is that I'm highly analytical and negligibly mechanical. So, I have to force myself to read the manual. I have to force myself to set up the machine and all that kind of thing. I'm very much into definition and splitting hairs and being absolutely precise with differentiations, but there's hardly anything going on when it comes to the mechanical 5B side of the fifth ray. You wouldn't want me as your airplane mechanic, okay? When it comes to devotion versus zeal, zeal is higher. But, well, not terribly, maybe 10%. I have a lot of both. But notice in the types, it's no longer the sixth ray dominating everything. The sixth ray, even in its highest, is below the wisdom side and below the abstract thinking side. The wisdom side is 2B and the abstract thinking 3A. I'm pretty much a combination of those things. And we find that, well, order and renovation, not too significant. They're there, and I don't know if they're anything to be embarrassed about, not too much. And I'm just not a transformer in any kind of physical sense, but in the mental sense, I would say yes. So you see, this is how it is now. But if we want to compare to how it was, and I'm trying to figure out whether I have enough space to kind of do that, and more or less I do. And let's just say, if anything, the destructive side was lower in the past, and so was Ray 1 in general, lower. And Ray 2A, the love side, quite a bit lower, more like not even 50%, where now the love side is more 70%. When it comes to wisdom, okay, 62% compared to a little bit more, 86%. So there's been an increase in wisdom too. Now, as far as being an abstract thinker, okay, that was always high. And my interest in business and activity and kind of manifesting plans to occur on the physical plane, really negligible in the past, and it has increased. So the third ray has increased both in abstraction and in manifestational ability. When you look at the fourth ray, however, we see it was more or less for harmony where it was, but the conflict side much, much higher, almost 90%. So the conflict side of the fourth ray now is about, I don't know, almost 70% maybe, but in the old days it was almost 90%. So much more conflicted individual in the past, and tempering that a little bit, probably because of the rising of the second ray. Obviously, ray 5 has increased, 5A, up to 92%. And it used to be not too bad, almost 60%. But look, there's just absolutely nothing at all about mechanical inclinations in the past. And, every once in a while now, I will read a manual. And this is represented by the 5%, 5B in the present, whereas 0% in the past. So, from the 5B perspective, I'm not your applied mathematician or mechanic or someone who is the handy person on the physical plane. When it comes to the sixth ray, devotion was less, but significant. And let's just see here. Zeal was a little higher. Now, I'm surprised to see so much zeal in the present time, pretty much equaling the zeal of the past, but it's much more directed. And in general, the seventh ray is lower order, and now there's more, and there's not too much difference in the transformational side of the seventh ray. So you can see, in terms of the types, there are very big contrasts for some people, and in my own particular case, there are. And this tells me something about the way I'm moving in life, because we're always moving, and the rays are changing their emphasis and their strength relative to each other. Okay. Now, let's see, we have, just as in the past, we have some contrasts that help us understand. So, the ray types combined, and we talked about why they combine, because there's some momentum from the past into the present, and when it comes there and we combine ray types, then the third ray is really, really prominent. The sixth ray of zeal is really prominent. The second ray of wisdom is significantly prominent, and the fourth ray of conflict significantly prominent, and the fifth ray of analysis, 5A, prominent, but negligible the mechanical aspect of it. So, what is that third ray doing up there? Well, I look at it, I think I'm involved in some monadic studies. I'm always deeply interested in the factor of being. I'm interested in the substratum. I'm interested in what it all came out of. These big, philosophical thoughts always attract me. And I think that's why that 3A is really so high. When we talk about applied mathematics and applied knowledge, it's really negligible. And not much is going on the seventh ray, though at least I can say I can use it at times. And astrologically, I can use it because Aries brings in the seventh ray and Cancer brings in the seventh ray, and Libra is the seventh sign. So there are some indications that the seventh ray is present, but the negligible rays have a lot to do with manifesting physically. Although I do make plans and get organizations together, I like it very much if other people do the more detailed work and I can more or less think about how it should be and be less hands-on. So this is a combination, ray types now and formerly, and we see that this individual is pretty much a combination of the third, sixth, fourth, and second rays. The fourth ray is surprising. Again, I say there's a lot of conflict there, but I think it has subsided somewhat. Anyway, you look for the highs and lows, and that can define who you're dealing with. Now, here, this is a good one, and I'd like to I wish I could get this out of the way. I don't know. Let me try this. Yeah, okay, that's better. Full screen. Well, here are four types together, and this is a very indicative chart. So both now and formerly, and you can see where you are. Now, obviously, when you look at the chart as a whole, look for the highs and lows. As usual, 3B and 5B are very low. Okay. The mental rays are the highest, and they would be the 3A for reasons that I explained, and 5A maybe because of the kind of esoteric studies I'm into. 5A is very important, and it's 5A now, and it's 3A now. Now the fourth ray of conflict, that was formerly. That's subsided. So look for the fourth ray now, and it is respectable but not over the top. So basically, the two highest are the two mental rays, and the next two highest are ray 2B, the wisdom side, now, and also the zeal side, both now and formerly, are highest. So this individual is a combination of rays 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The parts of the third ray are just not present. Parts of the fifth ray just not present. First ray is growing in the steadfastness aspect. Love is increasing. Wisdom is increasing. Abstract thinking is definitely increasing. There's a little bit more manifestational third ray coming in now, and there's still the conflict side is subsiding, and there's a big push to become very accurate in one's thought and even application with 5A. And 6 is kind of holding its own. 7th is always low. And out of this can come some impulse to formulate a ray chart, which seems reasonable and accords with the numbers. Now, the ray chart that I think I have, the third ray monad, the second ray soul, the fourth ray personality, going toward the first ray or the sixth ray. I hope it's not the sixth ray, but okay. The mind on the third ray, again, the abstract side, with a fifth subray, I believe, but also lots of 4 in the mind. The rays of Mercury, 3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, and 3, how you want to list them, are my mental rays pretty much. I'm pretty mercurial. When it comes to my astral body, it is the sixth ray. And when it comes to the physical body, it is the third ray, as far as I can understand. And so if you know how to read a chart like this, the indications, the indications are pretty much there for us to understand. Okay. Now I'm going to just got to make sure that I can look at all these things properly. So this is one of the most important charts, ray types formerly versus now. And obviously, if I'm heading into monadic studies, that high 3A is really, really important. And I think that anybody who's studying with me on the group Identify as Being will realize that the third ray has an exact prominence. And when it comes to definition, which I think is a passion for me, in my first philosophy book, the glossary had over 200 pages of very tight definition. So my mind is kind of a combination of the third and the fifth ray. I'll try to learn all the details, learn them precisely, and then weave them together in some kind of creative manner. All right, so that takes us, let's see, where does it take us to? I think you can get the idea here. That's the important thing. And maybe here are some contrasts. Ray types formerly to now difference. Well, there's a big plunge as before in the fourth ray and a big elevation in the accuracy part of the fifth ray. And here at least it shows the order part of the seventh ray increasing. pretty much everything is increasing, but the fourth ray is decreasing. And the zeal part of the sixth ray decreasing, but not really significantly. It's the 4B decrease and the 5A increase, which are noted. So maybe we have now an individual who is more in control, less dramatic, less likely to get into conflicts, more likely to think something through with real accuracy, and in general has calmed down quite a bit from the early days of acting, singing, and directing operas. And basically I've turned into a thinker rather than one who is teaching people how to display emotion artistically on the stage, and the chart indicates that. All right. Now, a little bit more here. Okay. There are a few more charts and graphs which are of interest. And this one is called ray lines. It's a very global kind of configuration. Although there are 7 rays, they are divided into 2 main energy streams or lines. The first line derives from ray 1 and includes 3, 4, and 5. These 4 are the so-called hardline rays. The second line, the soft line, derives from ray 2 and includes ray 4 and ray 6. It is often possible to gather an overall impression of oneself or another individual simply by consulting the relative elevation of the 2 ray lines. The hard line in red and the soft line in blue. Well, that figures. The hard line is more related to form and the soft line to the life within the form, as DK describes that in, I think, Letters on Occult Meditation and Initiation Human and Solar. The general balance of the 2 ray lines can be reasonably evaluated by consulting these graphs. So the general tendency of the 2 lines to increase or decrease can be seen. And you may also decide in a general way whether you should work towards achieving a better balance between them. So in terms of now, it's pretty obvious that I'm basically a soft line type. That's up at 75%. The 2, 4, 6 and the hard line rays, while increasing over the past, are more like 50%. As I say, I am a third ray monad. I'm quite confident about that, but I've also in my investigations determined that there are 2 monadic rays, and one of them has to do with the ray of the liberated monad, either into the Father, Son, or Holy Ghost on the logoic plane without the monadic vehicle. And there I think I may very well be the indigo higher second ray monad, basically the third ray being a sub-ray. So this shows that it's not a terrible balance or imbalance, but definitely the soft line rays prevail. As far as formally goes, the hard line was way down there, and the soft line pretty much where it is now. So I've increased the 1, 3, 5, 7 line, being for a number of lives maybe an impractical mystic, as so many of us perhaps have been. I've worked at anchoring my abstract ideas and feelings more on the physical plane, and so establishing organizations, at least giving the impulse for that, and working very hard at making them happen on the physical plane, but with the help of very competent people and associates who have more orientation towards the physical plane than I have. Anyway, there's been an increase of some 15% on the hard line. So at least we're getting right down to earth a bit. And the will line is increasing. So I think you get that, right? Now, the ray lines now and formally combine. Well, you get the idea about what that is. How it used to be and how it is now, really, they're not distinct. And oftentimes how it used to be sweeps in a little bit, right? So, but it still tells the same story with a big difference between the soft line and the hard line. The soft line is connected with the life aspect generally, and the hard line with the form aspect. We know that Master R on the third ray and the seventh ray is the amazing manifester, magical manifester, and the Manu deals on the first ray with strengthening the physical forms which have to receive the energy. So, how do we compare formerly and now? Well, hard line is increasing and soft line is increasing a little bit. I guess I've always been on the soft line, but the degree of control is what has been the factor. Now, as you get older, Saturn gets more prominent, of course, and Saturn is the planet of control. It does rule earlier age, just the way as every planet has particular years in the age of man when it rules. But there's been, in general, more control and a movement away from the sometimes uncontrolled fourth ray into the very focused sixth ray and into the first ray, which just demands that certain things get done. So in general, the increase in the hard line has been greater than the increase in the soft line, though there has been, for the soft line, more subtlety naturally coming in as the studies proceed. And then the ray lines formerly and now and the difference. So there you see that there's been a big increase in the hard line and a reasonable, small really, increase in the soft line, though it has become more refined. Now that will take care of the ray charts per se. And now we get into some different ways of assessing the rays, which are not so much based on answering those particular questions. As you can see, even this PIP number 3, which is not the 888 statement Tara test, is still pretty demanding. But after all, look, how much time have you spent trying to figure out your rays and ending up in a uncertainty and confusion? And I think that the quantifiable applied numbers approach of this method can be useful to you. And I have found it useful. I enjoy taking the test repeatedly and seeing if I can sometimes detect mistakes in the test by how my bar graphs work. Because after all, there's a lot of data here, and Rick had collected a lot of data, and I'm sure he'll be involved in the research along these lines in the future. And then we're going to know what our rays are, know how our spiritual approach should occur, know what materials and mantras and seed thoughts we should be using, and there'll be an altogether more precise approach to our spirituality and to our spiritual progress. So let's go on. And the next thing is our highest aspirations. Well, when it comes to aspirations, of course, I'm a little bit over the edge here, am I not? A little bit over the edge, and I'm not sure that I can. Yeah, maybe I can. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. Okay, Well, while aspirations are often thought to originate in the personality, and they do, of course, really, they are stimulated by the magnetic power of the soul, drawing the personality upward. And this tabulation will reveal to you your highest values according to ray type. And the goals which you rank highest will have much to do with your soul ray and personality ray. Okay. Though those you rank lowest may correlate with rays which are not found in your energy system. Sometimes a high aspiration has to do with qualities you idealize, but which are not really part of your present energy system. You realize the imbalance, and you like to have some of those qualities. Like I joke, I say I'd like to be able to read a mechanical manual with great joy, but it doesn't seem like it's coming up. In this case, the aspirations are compensatory. In the case that you don't really have those rays, but you know you should or could, and so you develop an aspiration for them to compensate, even though they're not in your ray chart. Sometimes you may find that you no longer aspire to the goals to which you used to aspire, at least not to the same extent as in the past. In any case, the ranking of your aspirations should help too, well, or should help you. Maybe that's a typo, not sure. Okay. Should help to do something, shouldn't they? Well, anyway, to clarify your ray formula. So, aspiration, now when you're filling these out, you don't know the rays to which they apply, but naturally, if you've studied the 7 rays for a long time, you do know what I'm targeting there. I just trust that everybody will be as honest and unbiased as they can be and leave wish fulfillment to the side. But of course, if there's a whole lot of wish fulfillment, it may be indicating the presence of the 6th ray. So there's lots of ways to come at this, and everything is significant. When I hold a 7-ray seminar, I says, look, observe yourself and observe everybody else and observe them closely, because you're going to learn from other people about yourself, and they're going to learn from you about themselves. So keep your eyes open and see everything they do, every step they take, how they talk, how they walk, how they dress, how they move, how they sit. Do they shake their leg? Do they not shake their leg? Are they composed? Are they all over the place in their body language? All of that is important. So keep your eyes open, and eventually it will even be shown that certain configurations in the face and form indicate the rays. So aspiration number 1, I aspire to become a dynamic, powerful, and benevolent leader, strong, firm, and steadfast in my service to the highest law and my defense of the greatest good. Now that's obviously an A. Doesn't say so here, and I think it should, but that's ray 1A. Okay. The oak tree part, Aspiration 2, I aspire to a deep, intuitive, loving understanding of people so I can nurture them and help them unfold their highest potential. Obviously, this is about the love side of the 2nd ray, which draws in the intuition and the loving understanding and so forth. It's not the austere wisdom side. Aspiration 3, so it's an A again. Maybe we've listed the A's first, right? I aspire to a resourceful, versatile mentality so I can apply it creatively to numerous intellectually challenging enterprises. Well, that's more a B. That's more manifestation in the world, intelligence expressed through manipulation and rearrangement in the world. When it comes to number 4, I aspire to express great artistry in every aspect of my life, thereby inspiring others to greater creativity and greater love of beauty. So It's the harmony, beauty, and art part of the fourth ray. It's the A part. I still have to figure out what the 3B is doing among the A's. Well, as I'm going through this to try to explain it to you, I'm seeing things that could help make the test even a little clearer and a little better. So, we're learning all the time. Number 5, I aspire to become vitally involved in discovering the keys and solutions of nature's mysteries through advanced scientific research and experiment. Well, okay, maybe that's neither 5A nor 5B, but it certainly emphasizes the research aspect of the fifth ray, and it's not so much necessarily involved with the mechanics side, although if you're in the lab, mechanics will be a definite hands-on requirement. Aspiration 6, I aspire to live with ardent faith, it's burning, and passionate commitment, unshakably loyal to my system of values and true to my highest ideals, my vision of the right. Well, there's a lot of zeal there. I can see that these aspirations are not technically only A or B or even the general side. They are something of their own, but I think they have an indication. Anyway, there's a lot of fire here, and there's a lot of zeal in this particular sixth ray approach. And then aspiration 7, I aspire to bring a beautiful, dynamic order out of the chaos of human living by grounding transformational ideas in practical activity and seeing them through to perfected expression. I can't say it's an A or a B. It's a bit of both, but certainly the principle of order is very strong there. And the practical grounding in detail is what the seventh ray can do. But then we return to ray 1, and I think you'll see the difference between the two red statements. I aspire to shatter chains, liberating people from all forms of bondage and oppression. So it's obviously the destructive side of the first ray. It's the hammer blow of Vulcan. It's the destructive approach of the lightning of Uranus. It's another majorly first ray planet. It's Pluto in its destructive aspect. So it can be very woefully applied, or it really can be a liberator. And it's the first ray as the liberator, not just as the one who stands strong and steadfast. Obviously, there are different types on these rays, and I didn't want to get too complex, and I just kind of basically kept 2 questions per ray. When it comes to ray 2, I aspire to a wise and intuitive. Ray 2 is always involved with the Buddhic plane and intuition, deep and complete understanding of life, so I can teach and illumine others. It's all about the light, and maybe it's more on the wisdom side than on the strictly love side, And a lot of people who study with the Tibetan, they have learned to use wisdom particularly, which does not mean that he does not emphasize love. He's always trying to emphasize love, but particularly the wisdom side is brought into the picture. Okay. Ray 3, I aspire to create a thoroughly comprehensive, totally rational, philosophical theory of truth through the power of deep thinking and the most careful reasoning. Well, this is the philosophical side of the third ray. It's obviously 3A, and it's much contrasted with the earlier green sentence where you're in the world and you're thinking, manipulating, arranging, rearranging, and seeing if you can solve problems, and planning and plotting and all that. This is much more about a lofty philosophical point of view. Now, number 11, aspiration. I aspire to be a mediator, a harmonizer, a bridge of at-one-ment, a reconciler of human conflicts, and an instrument of peace. Well, this is definitely the harmony side of the fourth ray, whereas the other almost yellow sentence, you can't get yellow so easily on the computer, it just disappears. The artist struggles, and perhaps the struggling artist is more represented by the first yellowish sentence, but then here we come into the one who can really harmonize conflict. And it's not so much harmony and beauty in art, it's harmony. And if beauty and art can be used to do it, great. But this is mediation, and this is the person who learns how to help people really get along by standing in the center and finding commonalities that unite them, common ground. Okay, now here's ray 5 again. It's an orange color. Now, interesting esoterically, the color indigo is an esoteric color of the fifth ray. There's a whole color science in there, but we don't, someday we'll get into that, and we do get into it in other ways. I aspire to invent or develop those mechanisms, instruments, or technical improvements which will transform and uplift the quality of human life. So you can see this very much correlated with the 5B aspect. It's really hands-on, and it's creating concrete forms, and it's understanding all the technicalities that you need in order to create these concrete forms. And number 6, I aspire with complete faith and utter devotion to serve God. Now, very devotional, right? Not the zeal part is up there on the rose-colored sentence number 1. To serve God, the worthiest cause of the highest ideal I can conceive. Now, it's not cut and dried so that, you definitely have like A or B or one or the other. Let's see what has happened to me here. Okay. Aha. All right. Looks like I have become a little bit smaller than I started. And I would say now I'm, back to the framing that we have been using, although you can also see the value of the small picture, of course. So anyway, it's not just a cut and dry thing. There's a lot of overlap. And I'm not pretending that this is, in the fifth ray sense, an absolutely rigorous test. When we give the 7-ray seminars, it's often the intuition of the one who gives the seminar and the intuition and observation of the one who is taking the seminar that helps lead to the proper ray. Yeah, that's the key. So we don't know how enlightenment will come. It will come. We don't know what door it will enter through. But we have to be terribly alert, like, when I get together for a 3-day 7-ray seminar with people, the main thing, stay alert. Stay alert to everything that passes through your mind and your body and your energy system. Stay alert to everyone. Stay alert to what they say, how they say it, the tone of voice. I oftentimes tell people, when you're as interested in the other person as you are in yourself, then you will know about yourself. So, we have enough wisdom within us to be able to detect a reasonable working hypothesis of a ray formula. And so I advise that kind of alertness which will make possible an acute estimation of the rays. I think we have one more here. Number 7. I aspire to involve myself deeply in the art and science of creative organizational transformation. Very Uranian, very much the 7B type. Redesigning and restructuring the patterns of human interaction so that a better world may rapidly emerge. So it's not so much order, although that has to be a part of it, but it is the way of rearranging things so they more properly suit the archetype. Now, basically, this is a demanding little section of the test, and I'm going to ask you to order these. Put them in order, how it was now, how it was formerly. So, you may have to go back a little bit, but obviously I wanted, how it is now, I want that comprehensive system of thought, which I'm working on with Identify as Being. And my 2 Ray 2 aspirations are both right up there, to nurture others and to have that illuminating understanding of life. And I have this aspiration regarding devotion, complete faith and utter devotion to serve God or the worthiest cause. Well, for me, the worthiest cause and the highest ideal, it's the hierarchy, it's the Christ, it's the Tibetan and his ashram, it's the hierarchy is the ashram of Sanat Kumara. That for me, zealously to serve those factors and what they want to do to bring the divine plan to earth. So where are we here? Let's see if I can. Right. Then number 4, it's about the artist of one's life. And I seem to have left that out when I was doing my... Yeah, I have all of this music that I've written, and I'd like to somehow promote it, even though maybe my creative work along that line is over with the passing away of the 4th ray in my own system, but the zeal is there. Aspiration 11 is all about harmonizing and helping to bring peace and understanding among people. And aspiration number 3 is about a versatile mentality to solve various problems on the physical plane. When it comes to first ray, okay, standing steadfast, very good, but, not the highest. And shattering chains, well, I have to be realistic. It doesn't work for me exactly in that way. But I suppose that a lot of the work that I do helps to break the mental bondage. Now, when it comes to Ray 5 and 7 stuff, it's just at the bottom. And that is exactly correlated with what the test showed. In other words, what I'm preferring here in terms of my soul aspirations, my goals, my personality, high personality desires, it correlates exactly with what the test is showing. A low 5th ray in one practical sense, quite a low 7th ray, and when it comes to all of the manifestational stuff, okay, it's pretty low on the 3rd ray. But the other part of the 3rd ray is high. So, we just look these up as we go back. And the lowest of all is all of that mechanical stuff. So I have this terrible feeling that I'll be born with a 5th ray personality, a 5th ray mind, so I can learn hands-on application. My dad, Capricorn, he could build anything. Surrounded by Capricorns. My present wife, Capricorn. They really are great manifestors, so one has to learn one day, right? And the rays show you what you have to learn. In the old days, the artistry thing was strongest. Ray 2 was still high. The desire to have that system of thought was still high. Ray 4, mediation and harmony was high. Versatile mentality high. 6 ray a little lower. Ray 5, well, nature's secrets. A little higher than now. Ray 1, not worrying so much about being strong in things, though because of Aries being somewhat strong. And again, Ray 7 and Ray 5 holding up the bottom pretty much the way it did for now. So you can tell the direction you're moving. And basically, Ray 4 has slid in its position. It doesn't show up here till number 5 in the now ranking, but it used to be the top. I wanted to be an opera singer. I wanted to be an actor, all those kind of things coming out of the personality pretty much. And now that just faded. But always Ray 2 was high, and always philosophizing was high. So you can pretty well tell, is the bottom holding the bottom? Okay, it is in this case. And is the top holding? Well, not exactly, because this ability to formulate this complete system of thought, which I'm not necessarily researching, but I'm thinking about it, that is very strong for me. Very strong now. Stronger than it ever was, but I always had that philosophical tendency. Coming, I think I was an old Neoplatonist, and I think I was in these sort of Greek academies where philosophy was being taught and understood and talked about. So there's been a switch, and the whole artistic impulse has slid down from first place to fifth place, and from fifth place to seventh place, and so forth. But still, the practical hands-on work is still wanting. Okay, so this correlates quite well with my chart in general, where 3A is so high, Ray 2 is quite high, Ray 6 is high, and Ray 4 is still respectable, and then those are the major factors, with the other ones being lower. So aspirations, well, look, what do you aspire to? What are your major high desires? That tells a lot. Always ask people about their desires, because they will tell you what they are oriented towards. What are your desires? And mine, to really understand philosophically the nature of being, to teach the ageless wisdom wherever possible, to help people out of their mental and emotional, general, that's it, mental and emotional limitations. As far as their physical limitations occur, maybe I have to leave that to other people. Those are the things that I want to do, and I'm going to be working along the second ray, third ray line, and in connection with Master D.K.'s ashram, who I think has a third ray monad and a second ray soul. And I don't know what his very highest monadic ray might be, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the second ray of love, wisdom. This is a new theory, and I do believe that the liberated monad going into the sea of fire on the logoic plane has its own ray. All right, Well, those are the good things, but now there are some glamours here. And these traits to transform, I could have called them glamours. I could have called them illusions. I just called them traits to transform. In occultism, these traits are called glamours and illusions. They relate to negative qualities which individuals express when they are strongly influenced by particular rays, but unable to control or properly direct the expression of these rays. Energies are neither good nor bad. All depends on the condition of the form through which they work. Master DK constantly tells us that we all have negative traits which should be transformed into positive traits. These negative expressions should correlate with the ray energies found in our ray chart presently, or perhaps formerly if there's, some of us are born with a real hangover, you might say. We've emphasized certain rays so strongly in the past that they're even stronger than the rays in our ray chart, which we're trying newly to cultivate. So a previous incarnation and its rays can be very influential. By studying your most prominent traits to transform, you can gather important hints regarding the presence of certain rays in your ray formula. You will also see perhaps which former traits to transform are no longer causing you difficulty, what you've overcome, right? And overall, you may receive hints on the manner in which you can improve your character. So here they are, 28 of them. And I guess the colors are correlated. It's a bit randomized, For ray 7, over concern for rules and regulations. Ray 6, uncontrolled, misguided enthusiasm. We see that all the time. Ray 5, too much skepticism. My spouse, your spouse, person close doesn't believe in what I believe. Well, that's not the case for me, but it can be the case for many. Too many highs and lows for the fourth ray. Ray 7, rigidity and inhibited self-expression. You see the rigid side of the seventh ray. Ray 6 again, excessive emotional intensity. It is the ray of undue intensity, the Tibetan tells us. Ray 7 again, subservience to habit and routine. Can't get out of our rut. Ray 5 again, can't see the forest for the trees. Lots of trees out there, but what does the whole thing look like? I see the garment of God, but I don't see the wearer of the garment. Ray 3, too much talking and hyperactive thinking that does not lead to tangible achievement. Okay, I can relate. Ray 2 again, the love of being loved. It's kind of a major glamour on the second ray. Then ray 1, excessive egoism, self-centeredness and self-importance, too determined to be the one at the center. We see that all the time in the field of politics and war and army and all that. Worse in politics, I think. Again, ray 1, selfish ambition for power. It's red as ray 1. Ray 2, too much study without taking action. That's interesting. Learn everything, do nothing. Ray 3, intellectual pride, and sometimes a certain type of ray 2 gets involved with that too. Ray 4, a tendency to self-contradiction, inconsistency, and unpredictability. I'm pausing on that one, remembering former days. Ray 5, number 16, too much intellectual analysis and dissection. Just take it all apart till there's nothing left, and the rationalism destroys. Then here's the rose color over-leaning on others. Who's the guru? Who is the leader? Who is the saint? Who is the teacher? I lean on them and not on myself. I have to learn self-reliance. Ray 7, over-concern for orderliness and detail. So you do everything for the form and nothing for the spirit. It's the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. Ray 4, over-eagerness for compromise. Peace at any price. Ray 6, I'm recognizing all these old Ray 4 glamours, and I only have you choose 5 out of these 28, but maybe a few more would be desirable, might paint a bigger picture. Over eagerness for compromise, peace at any price, and then Ray 6 again, over eagerness to trust and believe, misplaced devotion. Some teachers are accused of certain malfeasances, and the students just can't believe it because he's my teacher. My country, right or wrong, my teacher, right or wrong, God, mother, and apple pie. It's all of that. We see it happening today. Ray 3, wasted energy through overactivity, scattered living, and restlessness. After all, it is the ray of activity. Number 22, Ray 3 again, manipulativeness, deviousness, and active scheming. Big problem for the third ray. Ray 2, fear because of oversensitivity. That's a big one. And Ray 2 is the most fearful because the most sensitive at first, until perfect love casteth out all fear. And then Ray 1 again, desire to dominate and control others, the dictator. And in general, Ray 1, willfulness, regardless of what other people think, my will be done, right? And Ray 2, giving in too easily, yeah, that's a problem. Ray 5, intolerance of ideas which do not fit with the established knowledge. And finally, Ray 4, debilitating struggle, trouble, turmoil, all of the warlike difficulties of being a human being ruled by the fourth ray. So there we have it. And I just had us choose 5, but, as I read it, I begin to think that it might be desirable to, we're always modifying this, maybe have 10 choices out of the 28. It might be good, and to rank them. Whenever you're ranking different responses, it's always a question of that sort of discrimination. How do you know what's higher, a little lower? But you just have to feel it, in your heart somehow. You just have to feel it. And then you'll do your best you can. At least the top and the bottom will be relatively clear. So for myself, how it is now, trait 14, I wonder how bad that is. Intellectual pride. Well, I catch myself at that. I think it's actually waning a bit. The more I think about cosmos, the more infinitesimal I become. Then trait number 13, probably on the second ray, too much study without taking action. Well, I think I've somewhat overcome that as well. So how well did I choose when I did that? But I used to be that kind of 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day student. And as far as what I was doing in my life, I think I could make a pretty good case for getting dizzy from so much study. but eventually applying it in the formation of this university and these esoteric schools. The next one, trait 23, fear because of oversensitivity. I do assert myself as an Aries, but yeah, I think about certain situations and I recoil from them. When I saw those divers just last year in Thailand, was it? Going how many kilometers through narrow passages in their diving suits without being able to see underwater because a group of young scouts or students had been unwisely led into the cave in rainy season. I just said, oh, what's it like? What's it like to be a diver? One of them lost his life, heroic guy, and all the rest miraculously made it, and all the students miraculously made it. So that kind of courage, sometimes the second ray is not equal to. Trait number 27, intolerance of ideas that do not fit with established knowledge. Well, for me, Alice Bailey and Theosophy is established knowledge, and when things are glamorous and illusory, I can really come down pretty heavy on it, but I have to learn each one has to find their own way. And then trait number 9, and yet I can identify with so many of them. Too much talking, you'll agree with that, right? And hyperactive thinking that does not lead to tangible achievement. I hope it leads to some mental achievement. Now, so I'm feeling there's a lot more in there that are operative now, and I might rearrange them a little bit, I might rearrange a little bit as I look at these 28, and at different times of life, maybe they've been different. Emotional intensity was a big thing on the 6th ray for me earlier, and let's see if there's anything else here. Was I overleaning on others? I remember once my teacher of 7 years, he was taking a walk at night, came out of the darkness, and he said, "Oh, I've just been giving you a mental licking," said, "You've got to learn to depend upon yourself," because he had been, offering a lot. So, I learned that one back at the University of Michigan, long time ago. I don't think I give in too easily now. And I don't think I have a debilitating struggle and turmoil. But in the old days, let's see how that worked. Oopsie. In the old days, yeah, number 4, number 19, let's see. Number 4, array 4 trait, too many highs and lows. In the same afternoon, I could be in heaven or hell. And it's the mystic, when I was recapitulating the mystic phase. And then number 19, that was on the 4th ray. Number 19, over-eagerness for compromise. I sure do like people to get along, peace at any price. But on the other hand, I could have said debilitating struggle, trouble, and turmoil. All of those 4th ray things were operative in my life when I was a definite and confirmed 4th ray personality, probably from many lives. Now, things have started to change, maybe more towards the 6th ray and quite a bit towards the 1st ray. They've begun to change just because it's, necessary. So anyway, again, it's not an exact science here, but it's an indication. What else? Trait number 23, well, they show up in both places. And what is trait number 23? It's fear because of oversensitivity, and maybe more fearful in the early days than I am now, knowing more. And then array 6 trait was showing up in the old days. Number 6, excessive emotional intensity. Yeah, I believe I really was. And with Mars and the solar plexus hyperactivated, and with Mars and Neptune, 2 6th ray planets being in sesame quadrate with each other, they really were blending to make the solar plexus a powerhouse. And as I say, I taught people opera, which is singing with intensity and acting with intensity. And so there's a lot of 6th ray in my nature. And finally, number 21, wasted energy through overactivity, scattered living, and restlessness. I don't think I lived an orderly and routine life, but, there were other, certainly I did not have over concern for orderliness and detail. No. And maybe some people would say I had over leaning on others. This is the teacher, DK. This is my teacher, another teacher. Maybe I depended on them too much. So there are other things I could pull in here if I had a few more options. But, the present thing that I have to deal with, it says, is intellectual pride. Of course, I'm proud enough to think that I've overcome it. Okay. And then, some of these weaknesses of the 2nd ray. So it's the 3rd and 2nd ray, which are, 2 of the highest in my system from the ray type of ray types. Well, let's see, is that it? Now, there's a few other things there are response patterns. So there is high value in this tabulation. Definite response tendencies are indicated, and these tendencies can be correlated with arrays. Like sometimes everybody's going to answer very true, or sometimes very false, or some really cautious people are going to have always in between, or I don't really identify with that. That tells you something, about what they have. I find a lot of Ray 1 people answer high and everything, and Ray 5 people are much more discriminating. And maybe the scariest one I ever saw was this guy. He took the PIP and nothing in between. Everything was very true or very false. Very true or very false. So, scary. No shades of gray, absolutism, sixth ray, first ray, that kind of thing. So anyway, let's see, for instance, those with a high ray 5 in the energy system may be highly discriminating and rarely use the category definitely true, because they can always find exceptions. The overall elevations of their ray columns tend to be lower than the elevations for certain other ray types. With ray 6 types, both definitely true and definitely false category may be strongly emphasized, just the extremes, because they tend to see life in terms of extremes. The ray elevation for ray 6 tends to be higher than normal, perhaps because they are not so discriminating. They are to a considerable extent front-loaded, which means that the categories definitely true and usually true will have considerable weight. And when it comes to ray 1 types, they may see themselves as appropriating all rays, and so again we may find high elevations. Ray 4 types have difficulty seeing things all one way or another, and so responses that are more true than false, in between, and more false than true, not extreme responses, may be found in abundance. So the ray response pattern can also be used to detect patterns of extroversion and introversion, and lives are given either to being outgoing or to being indrawn, with higher elevations indicating the former, extroversion, and relatively low elevations, the latter, introversion. And all this is to say that the ray response pattern should be studied for the clues that it may reveal regarding predominating rays, and more analysis of this type is operating now. So it should be said that when a ray has a large number in the category of definitely true, the ray may be presumed to be prominent in the energy system. So sometimes I go through the questions, and if I've answered definitely true to something, I know it may really be part of my system. If the same ray has many definitely true responses, also has some definitely false responses, the cause is usually to be found in the difference between ray types, which can be of a very contrasting nature. Like I said, I would answer a lot of definitely true to the abstract side of the third ray, but when it comes to the kind of practical, manipulative, hands-on business, running around, all that kind of thing, as I work with material in the world, it would be definitely false. That is still the same ray. So one tries to find that. Well, what have we got here? Definitely it's a front loading, and that's going to tell me that, the majority there is definitely true or usually true. And, being the type that identifies with many things on the second ray, the definitely false and usually false is lower. So, it brings in the ray 6, at least from the response pattern. When it comes to formerly, well, the usually true is still high, and I was more rejecting of things, more definitely falses then. And when it comes to in between, not so much in between. If I combined for formerly, I get 34%, And when it comes to definitely true and usually true, in now I get 44%. So the first one is more front-loaded, more 2 and more ray 6 in my own case. Remember the ray 2 mantra, not is but me. So you identify with and as everything, and it's the inclusive Jupiter second ray that gets involved here. So sometimes patterns can, be detected not so much by the questions themselves, but simply by how you respond. So here come, statement responses. This is a comprehensive tabulation, which makes it possible for you to quickly find your response to any statement on PIP III. You can easily see how you responded to any given statement and with regard to the past, formerly, or to the present, now. When pondering the statement involved from a copy of PIP III, or maybe you find a way to, have in a different screen, you have a PIP III in front of you, and you can use the go to function, which you have to type in, go to number 100, go to 57, whatever. You can find out which ones are likely to be part of your system. So, when it comes to definitely true, I can see here from the now and the formerly how I answered to each one of these questions. But then I have to have in front of me a list of those questions. Now, somewhere here, let's see if I have it over here. Well, it tells me how many. Certainly tells me how many, but does it tell me, without looking through all of them, which ones were the definitely trues? And let's see if it does that or not, or whether that's something, that might be something that we would want to put in, like these are the definitely trues. You can pick them out here, of course, I see that as I go line by line, I see that number 2 is a definitely true, and I see, that number 28 is definitely true, number 19, and I can list them, but it'd be easier, I think, if we could actually see exactly which ones they were. So that's, obviously, even as I'm explaining this test to you, I'm thinking of ways in which it could be made better, easier for you. Like I say, if you can collect together your definitely trues and your usually trues, it's going to tell you a lot about what are your major rays, and your definitely false and usually false will tell us about what you're really not identifying with at all. So the response patterns, I think, can be interesting and indicative. Okay, well, we're getting to the end. And as I've, here, Walter's put this in, it's correct, you can take the PIP free of charge, and the research that we still have to do, and the processing and so forth, it's all supported by voluntary donations. So if you'd like to help us continue the work, then please visit this site. So that, friends, is my ray chart and life as seen through the 7 rays and a little bit of esoteric astrology. Now, obviously, when we offer the esoteric astrology seminar, we go much more deeply into it, but basically the sun, moon, and rising sign should be definitely used. So, we want to strengthen the rising sign. We want to live according to the higher aspects of the sun sign. We want to calm down and allow to graciously disappear the moon sign tendencies, and in general, use the higher aspects of all of them. Well, as I say, this is fairly spontaneous, and I do see things that would help us. As I'm going through this, I see things that would help us make the test even more useful to you. And there will be, I'm sure, a PIP IV with some minor changes, maybe even a PIP V minor changes. But we're always staying on top of it, and we're seeing how you respond and how it may be helpful to you. And the place where I really get the sense of how it's helpful is during 7-ray seminars, when people begin to really clarify what their ray identity may be. And that does happen. I think I drove everybody crazy with my search for the rays when I first went to the arcane school. It was my major passionate subject. And I remember a pretty well-known astrologer in the name of Robert Hand. I told him he was a good astrologer, and I said, what am I into? And at the end he concluded, oh, a ray freak, he said. Well, maybe I am a ray freak. Okay, whatever. But I blend that with esoteric astrology and close observation of the individual concerned. Because remember, in your causal body is stored your responses to many ray charts. You may have had more or less the same soul ray for a long time. Or two soul rays, let's say, if you're on ray 1, 2, or 3, you did start on 4, 5, 6, or 7, but other people are still on 4, 5, 6, or 7, millions of years in the soul ray, really. And personality ray, they've all been rotating, so you've had them all, except maybe not until later would you have the same personality ray as soul ray. And your mental rays have been operating usually ray 1, 4, and 5. Sometimes when you're a disciple, there can be exceptions. And your emotional rays, either ray 2 or 6, but DK had a lot of ray 1 emotional bodies because he was training disciples. And your physical rays would be usually ray 3 or 7, but DK had also some ray 1 physicals and even 1 or 2 ray 6 physicals, perhaps. I think so. So, there's a lot still to learn about this great science which supports the new and coming psychology. And I think it's fascinating to consider how to get the most out of your life spiritually by using the 7 rays and the esoteric astrological reinforcement in the best possible manner. So, as I say, this has been a spontaneous recounting of the results of the PIP test I most recently took. I've taken other tests and looked like the 7th ray was getting a little higher. 7A certainly was, but pretty much I'm getting consistency or reliability when I take the test, and the validity of the test. Those are the two things that analysts look for: reliability and validity. Does it really measure what it says it's measuring? That's validity. And reliability, if you take the test today and take it in 3 days, are your results similar? They should be. And if they're wildly different, then you have something called an unreliable test. Of course, a lot depends upon the mood in which you take the test. It's not so much a test as it is a questionnaire, to give you a quantitative basis for launching into your own speculations about what may be your rays. And DK thought that was so important. Everybody really had to know their rays and how they were working out to best advantage or to no advantage in their life. And sometimes those hangover rays, we might call them legacy rays, They could work for good or for ill, and people might depend too much upon them, and if we emphasize our personality ray over our soul ray, it would be a problem, because we really have to emphasize the soul, and there's always a fight going on between the personality ray and the soul ray until a certain point is reached. So yes, indeed, we do have all the rays, but the ray of our soul is the most important. And the ray of our monad will be the most important when we reach that point where we're really living focusing on the cosmic etheric planes, which involve the Buddhic, the Atmic, and the monadic. And for some high people, like the Christ and the Buddha, involve the logoic plane, the very highest plane. Now, I know I've dealt with some technicalities and esotericism here. I trust that I've been clear enough so that even if you're not an avid student of the Tibetan, you would like to become so, or that at least the ideas are clear. We're all of us on our way to greater and greater identifications, and there are cosmic paths that lead on, and some of us one day may be planetary logoi in the company of many others that we have blended with, and some of us will be helping to clear the lower astral plane from the cosmic astral plane, and most of us will be going to Sirius to be trained as solar angels to do for others what they have done for us, lifting us out of the animal and strictly human state. And some of us will become a ray, so to speak. The Christ is on the ray path, and he will be for some time a ray of love wisdom, but eventually go to the planet Sirius, where he's not the planet, but the star Sirius, in which he's already an initiate. And some of us in the company of others will become solar gods, and some of us will reach for still higher states, what's called the path of absolute sonship, and we will become karmic lords. So we have a great future, future that we cannot describe, but knowing ourselves, know thyself and thou shalt know the world. Knowing ourselves is the key to a successful starting of this adventure. It's the key. And hopefully this work, preliminary work, gotta call it preliminary work on the 7 rays will help us all get a firmer basis on what our in-universe identity is. As far as our true identity, it's all the same, it's only one being, but we're all different emanations of that one being right now, and we've got to find our way back higher and higher, ever more refined, ever more serving and useful, ever more solving the problem of any particular universe, and the study of the 7 rays should really help us do that. Well, I don't know when to stop talking. I think maybe the time has come. I see different things that would help us make things clearer in your studies. I see a few little things for the test. I'm very grateful for the test, to Rick for so many years, and now to Walter, and very grateful. I've mentioned the people that have helped crunch the numbers and do the statistics and all of that. Kathy and Jose, and very grateful. And at least I think we have a running start here on understanding our identity from the point of view of the science of the 7 rays. Okay, many blessings, lots of love, and I don't know if anyone will have had the patience to listen to this all the way through, but okay, if you did, I've done my best to make clear how you can use the PIP in its incarnation now, PIP III, and I can see PIP IV and maybe PIP V coming. And then there's the Terra test, that big process, 888 questions or statements, 2 or 3 weeks of meditation and all the rest. Maybe someday you'll be getting into that. So this then is the end, mercifully, and we'll be talking to you. So when we have a 7-Ray seminar on the internet, maybe you'll join and maybe learn more. I know I always learn more when working with people who want to understand their rays. So bye-bye for now.